everyone. So we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining us today for the Imagine 2021 day session with our very own alumna, Geordan Holmes. This is one of the many sessions offered to students this week during the Imagine 2021 program, sponsored by the President's Office, Career Services, and the Oswego Alumni Association. So to start off, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Jessica Burnett, and I am a junior studying public relations and minoring in business administration. On campus, some of the things I'm involved in are Dels Art Dance Club, where I choreograph dances, and I'm also a dancer at the end of the semester's recitals as well. Other than dance, I'm also an intern for FANS as a public relations intern, and FANS is also the Future Alumni Network. And I'm also a member of PRSSA, which is the Public Relations Student Society of America. After college, my dream job would be to do some type of public relations work for Walt Disney World because I'm a huge Disney fanatic. But before I do that, I want to definitely work for a public relations agency in the city. Those are definitely two of my dream jobs. One of the upcoming Imagine 2021 sessions that I feel would benefit me personally the most would actually be taking place tomorrow at 7 p.m. through an Instagram live stream. And this live discussion is called My Identity and My Career. And I think this would be super beneficial because this is definitely something that can help students like myself figure out how they will be identifying themselves throughout their careers as well. So the sessions held today kicks off week 4 of the Imagine 2021 program, which is a 5-week program focused on giving students and the class of 2020 the chance to explore paths, find job and internship opportunities, network with alumni, and so much more. Feel free to check out the website for more details. The link is located in the chat. And if you complete 3 items on that weekly checklist, you'll be eligible for the drawing at the end of the week, and the direct link to that is also in the chat as well. And now I am so excited to tell you about today's speaker, Geordan Holmes. Geordan Holmes is a licensed mental health counselor that has worked with children, families, and adults in a variety of settings post-graduation. Geordan received her Bachelor's of Psychology in 2013, as well as her Master's in Mental Health Counseling in 2015 from SUNY Oswego. In this workshop, she will discuss an overview of her work experience and provide an inside look into the day of a mental health counselor. A brief overview of the program and a pathway to licensure will be discussed, as well as other career opportunities in the human services realm. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to place them in the chat and I will get to them at the end and she will be able to answer them for you. And with that being said, please join me in welcoming Geordan Holmes.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for having me be part of this event and allowing me to be part of this event. I'm just going to pull up a PowerPoint. I can't share. Let's see here. All right, so like I said, thank you so much for having me be a part of this event. My name is Geordan. I am a licensed mental health counselor, and hopefully today you can take away just kind of a snapshot of the education that's required, a little bit about what it's like to work as a mental health counselor outside of the academic setting, and other opportunities. If you are not interested in pursuing your master's degree, there are other positions within human services where you can still work with in helping individuals. So a little bit about me. So like I said, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also a national certified counselor through the National Board of Certified Counselors. I am a SUNY Oswego alumni, so I was actually a transfer student to SUNY Oswego. I spent the first 2 years post high school attending a community college where I now work, but for majority of those 2 years, I was fairly undecided. I was pretty lost and had no idea what I wanted to do. I changed my major 4 times. Before I settled on psychology, and I chose to transfer to SUNY Oswego, actually not because of academics or the campus itself. I chose to, my primary reason that I transferred to SUNY Oswego is it's because it's one of the only colleges within the central New York region that has a collegiate figure skating team as a club sport that is competitive. So that was really the only reason I wanted to transfer to SUNY Oswego. And I don't regret it because I loved the campus and that was an amazing opportunity. We actually went to nationals, so it was just an incredible experience all around. And it really honestly helped me as a transfer student, just in making connections and friends, because it's a unique experience in itself, just being a transfer student and kind of coming into pre-existing social circles and whatnot. So, and then I ended up staying for my master's in mental health counseling as well. So I had quite a few years at SUNY Oswego. I am also an Ask mentor, so an alumni sharing knowledge mentor through SUNY Oswego. That is fairly new. I started that this past fall, and that's been really awesome as well. It kind of helps fill my cup and help make me feel like I'm helping other students just with COVID, and kind of my own job right now has been slower than it typically would be for a variety of reasons. So I've really enjoyed working with students, and it's pretty similar to what I'm doing today and helping explore their interests in human services or counseling, talking about the educational pathway and, other routes as well. And then totally unrelated, I am a professional figure skating coach. I've been doing that for the past 2 years. So I work with young kiddos, I work with adolescents on a variety of disciplines from moves, dance, and jumps and spins. So that is another thing I also do. And I didn't put it on here, but I'm a dog mom. I have a toy Aussie that keeps me more than busy. So she's a big part of my life as well. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just kind of talking about counseling. And the reason that I felt like it was important to add this slide in is because I think that just in working with our career services office, working with exploratory students, undecided students, a lot of the times what they'll state is that there's always an intrinsic desire to help or really want to help others succeed and be successful. But the flip side of that is that oftentimes that's followed up with, they like to give advice and tell people how they can fix things. So, and also in the media and movies, TV series, etc., it's often depicted inaccurately. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what counseling is and what you can expect. So counseling is more of a partnership than it is therapists prescribing what works for us and then giving that to our clients and telling them that that's going to work for them. So we really aim to create a strong therapeutic rapport and partnership with our clients that can help empower them and assist them to heal from various adverse life events that they may have gone through or are currently going through. We also help them learn how to cope with challenges or stressors in a healthy way. And sometimes those stressors and challenges are ongoing. So it's not just a single event that's happened in their lives. Sometimes it's ongoing and it's, kind of outside of their control. So how can we help them learn how to cope with that in the best way that they can? And then ultimately, help them reduce mental health related symptoms or behaviors in intensity, frequency, and duration, so that they don't impact their ability to hold a job or their ability to be academically successful, or their social relationships, familial relationships. So that's kind of, I guess, an overall definition. And our ability to work with an individual or client is really based on kind of where they are in the process of that. So ultimately, what we'd like to do is collaboratively identify goals for counseling, but that's also based on um, an individual, a child, and a student's readiness level. So sometimes students come to us and our clients come to us and they're mandated. They don't necessarily, those students or individuals don't always necessarily have insight or awareness into how their behaviors are maladaptive or unhealthy for them and how it's impacting various level areas of their lives. But sometimes we do get individuals or students that come to us and they're more in like a contemplative preparation stage. So like they do have like an awareness level. They understand that something that they're doing is not working, or something is challenging or stressful in their lives. And they're ready to kind of engage in that process and start taking the steps they need to in order to start to resolve some of those conflicts. So again, it's really based on where your student is in kind of like the stage model of change. And then we also help students, individuals, families identify and explore some mistaken beliefs, any kind of cognitive distortions that they're holding that might be impacting various areas of functioning, underlying emotions, particularly for individuals that are coming in for anger management, and helping them learn what are the underlying emotions that are really fueling this anger and their behaviors. So some of the common presenting concerns that you'll see in counseling, but this is not an extensive list whatsoever, is just stress. It could be personal, it could be occupational, financial, cultural, anxiety, depression, grief and loss. I would say the last three, anxiety, depression, grief and loss, have accelerated greatly due to the pandemic and just a lot of unfortunate loss that has occurred. Relationship issues, anger management, addiction, domestic violence and sexual assault, eating and feeding related disorders, sexual and gender identity disorders, adjustment related concerns, trauma. The list kind of goes on, and those presenting concerns will be different based off of just different settings that you can work in. So it really just depends on what population you want to work with and where you are working. So this is just a snapshot of the mental health counseling program at SUNY Oswego. So this is the program I completed. And I'm not going to get in depth with this, but I'm just going to briefly touch on it. So SUNY Oswego's program is CACREP accredited. And when you are looking for a graduate program of really any sort, it's important that you look for CACREP accredited because it means that the program meets the state's educational requirements in preparation for when you take your licensure exam. So you know that the education that you're getting is going to help prepare you for that exam that is also very expensive. The program in itself is 60 credit hours. 48 credit hours of those will be in your core requirement classes, and 12 will be in electives that you can choose to take. Some of your core requirement classes are personality development, psychopathology, where you'll start to learn about the DSM-5, ethics, consultation, psychological education and appraisal, race, class, and gender, intro to group, counseling theory and process, research methods, and vocational development and decision making. There's also a variety of electives that you can take in, I believe that they have alcohol and substance abuse classes now, if that's a population that you're interested in working with. Play therapy, I took a few of those in graduate school. I highly recommend it. Awesome, awesome classes. And then there used to be I don't know if there still is, but there was a trauma studies certificate. So I did take almost all of my electives in trauma studies for a certificate of advanced study. So during your program, your 60 credit hour program, you will be required to work at a practicum placement where you'll complete 300 hours of experience. At least 150 of those will be direct client hours where you are providing counseling to whatever population that you're working with. And the same is for internship placement, except it's 300 hours, at least 300. And then the remainder of those are indirect hours. So clinical notes, any kind of workshops, supervision, etc. The one thing I would recommend that I would change if I could go back in time is that I stayed at the same practicum and internship placement. And there's nothing wrong with the site I did that at. I had a great experience there. I loved everybody that I worked with and that provided me supervision. But I think that if I had a chance to do it over, I would have chosen to choose a different internship placement to get a different experience. So just something to think about, something I would probably encourage students to do that I would do differently now. And then after you achieve at least 30 credit hours, you apply for what's called degree candidacy. And then there is a exam that you take while you're in the program. And it is called the Counselor Education Comprehensive Examination, which sounds really scary, but your classes, I promise, will help prepare you. Your instructors will help prepare you, and you really will get exactly what you need as long as you go to class and do the work. You do need to study for it. It's not an exam that you can just wing it and expect to do well. It is 120 multiple choice questions, and it is from various areas of your coursework, from group work to foundations to human growth and development, vocational and lifestyle development, appraisal, research methods, and professional orientation and ethics. So again, your coursework is going to help prepare you for that. And as long as you study and prepare for it, you should be okay. So postgraduate, what this looks like. So once you complete the program, and you'll start some of this when you're still in the program, so probably within your last semester, you will apply for what's called a limited permit. And your limited permit is good for 2 years. And that's where you're going to be doing your 3,000 hours of supervised experience. So you have to have an approved site supervisor with approved credentials, and you also have to have an approved site. If for some reason there are other obligations that you have, or you're just taking a different course with your professional career, you can extend your limited permit. So you don't have to complete it in 2 years, but you do have to reapply for an extension. And once you complete 3,000 hours of supervised experience, there's all sorts of forms you have to send to the state and whatnot. But you can schedule your National Clinical Mental Health Counseling exam. You do not have to do that after you complete your 3,000 hours. You can do that while you're completing your 3,000 hours. You just won't receive your license until all of that information has been submitted to the state. Your National Clinical Mental Health Counseling examination, is it's 10 case studies, and they are simulations that are aimed to help assess your clinical problem-solving abilities, analyze and diagnose clinical presenting issues. And usually each case study is broken up into, I would say, probably 5 to 6 mini sections. And each mini section is either like categorized information gathering or decision making. And you will select bullets, so it's on a computer. You will select bullets, and those will, score you from -3 to +3 based on what you choose, in order to be able to accurately diagnose the presenting problem. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it's like to be in the field, some of the positions that I've held, and some pros and cons to those positions, and some things I've learned along the way. So my first job, I'll talk kind of like about a typical day at this job. My official title with it was primary therapist for the intensive treatment program. This was a position I worked at through a non-for-profit with kids that were in out-of-home placement. So typically on abuse, neglect petitions, or person in need of supervision petitions. And the kids that I worked with were typically ages anywhere from 6 to 18. And I primarily worked with the boys' cottage, but also covered in the girls' cottage as well. So this was a trauma-focused agency. And typically when I came into work, my goal was to make sure that I reviewed direct care staff notes in the electronic health record. So I would create a treatment plan for every kid in the cottage based on their needs and what they need to do in order to be safe and reunited with their family or freed for adoption. And childcare staff would link how each kid would do with those goals in what was called program milieu therapy in the electronic health record. So every morning I would try to come in and check those if there was anything significant that individual would move to as a priority on who I needed to see for the week. I also aim to check voicemails, return calls to anyone on the treatment team that you have a release of information to talk to, and respond to emails. I will say that that wasn't always the case. This was a setting that is fairly unpredictable with behavior. And so any restraints that a child would be in, or if they were to run away, or if they had suicidal ideations and needed to go to the hospital to be evaluated, all of that takes precedence over anything that you had on your to-do list for that morning. So if those things occurred, I would have to immediately start notifications. There was a lot of a paperwork process for this. So oftentimes when those things happen, they result in enhanced safety plans needing to be created, communicated to the entire treatment team, an update to individual crisis management plans. So those are really aimed to identify triggers for each individual client, protective factors, and then what can help de-escalate them from reaching a crisis stage. And then attendance and participation in deconstructions. So those typically happened in the school setting when there was a significant restraint event. I was also responsible for treatment notes, so your individual session notes, creating treatment plans and updating those every 2 months. And there's also meetings held with that. Service plan reviews, which is what the family needs to do, basically to be discharged from the social services department and have the kids return safely home to them. Psychosocial assessments, which were extensive. Oftentimes when kids are coming into placement, they've been in various other placements, whether that's respite, foster care, other residential facilities. And so reviewing all prior documentation and then having to, basically build on that to create your own psychosocial, interview the parents or foster parents, whatever. Semi-annual assessments, which were updated every 6 months. Those are based off of the treatment plans and how they're doing in school, in program, in therapy, on their home visits, and with recreational therapy. And then court reports, which had to be submitted before any court proceeding, and then crisis management. So typically what my schedule would look like, because as you can see, there is a whole lot of paperwork. It's very, very documentation heavy, is I would have about 2 sessions per day. So again, I had about 9 clients in total. and I would try to see at least 2 a day. And then I also ran 1 group therapy per week. So in the program, you will take intro to group, and that was really helpful because I was responsible for running social skills groups and anger management groups for those children. In addition to all the above, I was also responsible for attending clinical supervision each week with all clinical personnel on the campus. So for every cottage, there's a therapist, and then there's clinical managers and assistant directors. So that was your meeting to meet with all of them, talk about any cases that are challenging or you're having issues with, brainstorm with the team. Facilitate and run treatment meetings. So like I said, those are every 2 months. And attend program meetings. So that's with your direct care staff, your program manager, usually your clinical manager is there as well. Those are weekly. And then attend individual supervision with your supervisor that is responsible for supervising your hours. So it is a lot. The negatives to this job, looking back on everything, is that it was really fast paced. It was very unpredictable and very, very stressful. It was very documentation and paperwork heavy. I really feel like looking back on things, you kind of just lose sense of time with everything you're responsible for. But I was doing much more documentation and paperwork related responsibilities versus actual counseling with kids, with families, in groups. And I think that over time impacted my job satisfaction and really what I wanted to do with my career. So those are some of the cons that I can reflect back on now. Some of the positives from that work placement were that I was able to work with a very strong trauma-informed team of individuals. It was an interdisciplinary team, so I worked with, probably 40 individuals for any one person. And there was just such a strong level of support amongst administrators and amongst the clinical staff. So that was really helpful to balance out, some days that were just really difficult. And I also was able to be immersed to a variety of presenting behaviors, diagnoses, different treatment approaches, and various traumas. So I did do a trauma certificate while I was at Oswego, and I do feel like that gave me a good foundation because I had no idea the extent to which I was going to be dealing with this in my everyday work. And had I not had that foundation, I think it would have been even more difficult. So I think that my education really helped me specifically in this work setting. But in working with kids, I was able to use some play therapeutic techniques, even though I'm not a certified play therapist, but some of those classes kind of helped me when I had some tough spots with kids, especially when they don't feel safe or trusting of adults, especially when you're working with underserved or marginalized families. They have a difficult time trusting you as a therapist. So with that stress, I was looking to kind of expand my skills, looking for a different setting, a fresh start. So I ended up working in a alternative education setting as a licensed mental health counselor / school social worker, which is what they refer to me as. And we serve general education students, alternative education students, and special education students. When I first started, I started in grades 7 and 8. And it was very similar to the individuals that I worked with in my prior work setting. The difference was really just the intensity and frequency of the behaviors. And that quickly changed because there is a lot of turnover with certain settings in mental health providers. So we had lost a social worker, and my caseload went from just grades 7 and 8 to grades 7 through 12. So I had a lot more students on my caseload, and I became very busy very quickly. So the positives of working in a school setting are obviously the school schedule is great. You go in early, you get out early. For the most part, you get school vacations, summers off. So there's a lot of positives to that. Lots of time to kind of decompress when things are very busy and sometimes really stressful in the school setting. But typically I would try to come in around 7:50 and give myself about 20 minutes to check emails, voicemails, get my walkie-talkie set up for the day, and get downstairs. And from 8:10 to 8:45 is when kids would enter the school. So social workers, licensed mental health counselors, we would stand when the kids came in to make sure that they were greeted with a smile, a welcome, kind of just try to start their day in a positive direction, make them feel like there's an adult there that cares for them and is there to support them. But also we were responsible for being like an extra set of eyes for the halls and cafeteria. So in the school setting, you wear kind of a few different hats. And then from 8:45 to 9:30, which was first period, what we would do, and this changed over the 11 months I was there, but there was a real push for socio-emotional learning standards and wanting to get counselors into the classroom and kind of start talking about those things in the classroom. So we would do something called morning circles where we would check in with students. The idea is for them to sit in a circle and have them identify how they feel, a goal for the day, and a person, a staff person, or even a peer that could help them that was positive influence. And then the rest of the morning was really set up to meet with students individually or in groups, and that was based off of their IEPs at their determined increments. From 12:30 to 1, I say I had lunch. I don't think I ever really had a lunch by myself. A lot of times I would have students come for lunch and have their sessions. We would eat and also talk about whatever their IEP goals were, or even individual sessions. So I very rarely took a lunch by myself, and that was my own choice. Probably would do it different if I went back. I would have a little bit better of boundaries with that. And then more individual sessions or group sessions. And then at the end of the day, when they're dismissing, we do the same thing. We would, line up, make sure that we were there to support them as they left. And, hey, I'm excited to see you tomorrow. Can't wait. And then from 2:30 to when we were released, we would complete our clinical notes, attend meetings with other social workers, vice principal, principal, and complete any referrals or notifications to parents or guardians. There's other functions that you have to attend. There's faculty meetings, superintendent conference days, parent-teacher conferences, program review meetings. Like I said, the pros are that you're on a school schedule, days pass quickly, your therapy goals are very straightforward. They're based off of the IEPs. The documentation is much, much less, and it's a fairly independent position. The cons were that from my previous setting, I had a really difficult time adjusting because the team-oriented approach was a lot different in the school setting, as well as the approach to behavior. So I came from a very trauma-informed agency where behavior is looked at much differently than in the setting I moved to next with the alternative education setting. It was much more approach from like a medical model, like how do we fix this? That kid needs a pill or they need to take something for their anxiety. There was always like a pressure for the social workers to just kind of like quick fix it. And that's not always possible in those moments. There was also, and this is not across all of these settings, but in the setting I worked in, there was a very high crisis frequency and duration. to the point where it just seemed like I was putting out fires, or social workers were just putting out fires throughout the day, probably from like third period to eighth period every day. So it really took away from individual sessions at times for other students. And yeah, it was just much different. So my current setting that I'm in now is a collegiate setting. So I work as a licensed mental health counselor at a community college. We have a transfer agreement with SUNY Oswego. So some of my students end up transferring to SUNY Oswego. But a typical day, and this is obviously prior to COVID, this is much different with COVID. But prior to COVID, we would have intakes for about an hour and a half, and then continuing sessions are 1 hour following that. We mostly provide solution-focused brief therapy. So we do 5 to 7 sessions, sometimes longer, and it really depends on the circumstances. Some of those circumstances are that students are still on their parents' insurance, and maybe their parents aren't supportive of them going to counseling, or maybe they don't want their parents to know that they're going to counseling. So referring them to a community-based provider can sometimes be really challenging. So for those students, we'll typically hold on to them a little bit longer just to make sure that they have that continued support that they need. We also make referrals to community-based providers. So you get to know different providers, and if anyone specializes in certain therapeutic techniques. So we do a lot of referrals for students, especially if we're doing an intake and we recognize that that student is a little bit more higher needs or needs a higher level of support. We'll automatically go ahead and talk with them about that process and help start making that referral. I'm also part of some committees on campus. So I am on the Healthy Lifestyles Committee, and we do the campus programming for alcohol and substance education, sexual assault, domestic violence, Title IX related education and concerns. And then we do other programming events based on trends or populations, things that we feel are important for the campus. That has been a huge challenge with COVID, just due to students kind of being zoomed out. They're not attending events as well as we would like them to. So we're trying to do a couple different creative approaches for this semester. I'm also a member of the Behavioral Evaluation and Response Team, which is comprised of both myself and my other licensed mental health counselor I work with, a couple of department deans and chairs, student affairs, personnel, and what we basically do is we meet every 2 weeks, and we review any reports submitted by faculty, staff, even tutors and whatnot, that submit concerns of behavioral concerns related to disruption to the educational environment. And then we create a plan to help hopefully reduce that and connect those students to supports so that those are not ongoing concerns. We also provide crisis management for the campus. Again, this has changed with COVID, so a lot of our crisis management has been kind of third party, just in the differences between staff and faculty and how they interact with students now is mostly through email or even text message at times for advisement. And sometimes students answer back with very detailed and concerning information. So sometimes we take those over and help those students get connected to supports. We also help connect students to other offices on our campus. So oftentimes when we're working with students in counseling and they're coming to counseling, typically there's a lot of other stuff going on that can heighten and make the already existing stress compounded. So we do a lot of referrals to our College Community Connection office, our C3 office, and they handle anything that's a challenge that's not as academically based. So if there's transportation challenges, um, challenges with internet, especially with classes being mostly online now, um, childcare, etc. So they really help with so many different things that students might not even know that they have access to. We also do a lot of referrals to what's called the Learning Commons. So we help students get connected to tutors, especially if they're struggling, better to get connected sooner rather than later. We also help refer them to our Office of Accessibility Resources that helps deal with physical or emotional disabilities that students might have, especially for students that had an IEP or 504 plan. They don't always know that there's accommodations at the college, so we help connect them to those offices. And then obviously to advisement, as advisors are kind of acting more as case managers now. So the last point that I'll talk about is that we do a lot of presentations and trainings for the campus. So we are responsible for RA training every semester. We actually just finished that up this semester. So we do an alcohol and substance abuse training with them and a conflict training. We do new student orientation training every semester. And then this past semester and the semester before, so in the fall and spring, we did a presentation to many, many different departments on mental health distress, crisis, and how to handle emergencies, mental health related emergencies, because we were having so many students expressing real concerns through email, through text message, just in a variety of ways. And staff were feeling a little bit unprepared or not sure of how to handle those. So we did a lot of trainings for that this past semester. So this position has been my favorite position. I absolutely love my job. It's been over a year and I'm still very, very happy. I love everybody that I work with. I work on a very supporting team. I have a supportive supervisor, but it's also a fairly independent position as well. So that is an aspect that I like. So you can be independent, but you're also team-oriented as well. With the college setting, collegiate setting, we're exposed to a variety of populations, different cultures. You're going to be working with international students and different presenting concerns. So we just never really know what students are going to come in for an intake with. It's really an opportunity to collaborate with a bunch of different offices and personnel on and off campus. And then, like I said, we do other functions besides just counseling. So we are part of committees, we're part of events. We put on presentations and trainings and just try to help others feel prepared and feel like they can even call to just consult with us as well. Some of the cons, one of the cons, and there's really not a lot of them that I can talk about, but one of the cons that, and it's not even a con really, it's just an issue that kind of comes up often, is that students that are coming to college, especially straight from high school, sometimes have turned 18, so they had a pediatrician and they are not established with a primary health physician. A lot of times have anxiety making that phone call, making that connection. But it's important that they have a primary health physician, especially if that student is needing medications at all, or had medications and needs continuing bridge scripts, because it's very difficult to get them into a psychiatrist, especially in my area. Sometimes the waiting list can be anywhere from 6 to 9 months. So we do ask for a release of information and connect with their primary health physicians much of the time. So I will talk a little bit about what you can do if you don't want to be a counselor. So maybe you are human services and psychology, but you don't necessarily see yourself becoming a licensed mental health counselor. that's okay too. There's so many positions that you can do with a background in human services, human development, or psychology. So one of the ones, and some of these titles are interchangeable, so you'll see them vary based on who's posting them, where they're being posted. But there's a lot of behavioral management caseworker positions, case management aides. And those are really important positions because you're helping connect an individual, or maybe a few individuals if you're working with families, to a sphere of services. And sometimes that's anything from employment to getting them connected with a mentor, especially if they're, I don't know, they don't have a lot of supports in their lives, and even counseling. Those individuals also help perform intake interviews, home visits, and really encourage and empower the clients and individuals that they work with to utilize all of the supports that they have set up for them. You also can work as a child protective caseworker or social services caseworker. So you're going to be working with a plethora of service providers, and typically with adults and or kids due to safety related concerns, abuse, neglect. Child protective works with abuse, neglect. So those are positions that you can apply for. There's also criminal justice positions. So there's probation and parole officers that work with adults and or children, and can help track behavior, coordinate with other professionals, and make recommendations to courts. There are rehabilitation caseworkers, and they assist individuals with physical and or mental disabilities become self-sufficient and try to live on their own. They help them overcome some of the personal and psychological effects of those disabilities. And you can work in a variety of settings, from rehab facilities to various nursing homes and even youth organizations. So again, just kind of depends on the population you want to work with, what interests you. There's also family support advocates, adoption caseworkers that help find a home for kids that are freed for adoption, victim advocate and caseworkers. So what they do is help support the rights of individuals that have either witnessed a crime or been subjected to a crime, and they help explain their rights while also providing them emotional support and even connecting them to additional supports. So an example of that, just to give you an idea, is we have a peer advocate that works at the YWCA that deals with domestic violence, sexual assault, and they come to campus and hold office hours. They haven't because of COVID, but prior to COVID, they would come each week, hold office hours, meet with students if that was something that is a challenge in their lives, and they would help connect them to supports. So that is an option if that's something that you're interested in. There's also human resources positions that you can apply for, helping screen and hire new employees, helping them with procedures and policies, benefit plans, payroll, etc. Sales, marketing, insurance, real estate, business, public relations, hospice workers. So there are a ton of things you can do with human development, psychology, human services that are just bachelor level. Some positions, if you want to advance, you will have to complete additional education or maybe even trainings required by the companies, but there are positions out there. It just really depends on your interests. Opportunities for master's degrees. So again, licensed mental health counselor, licensed marriage and family counselor if you want to work with couples and families, and then licensed master social worker, licensed clinical social worker, very similar to licensed mental health counselor. You can work in a variety of settings as a counselor. anywhere from higher education, middle school, high school, to the collegiate level. You can be a college instructor. You can be the director of human services agency, and also a clinical manager in helping supervise, guide other individuals that are accruing their clinical hours towards licensure. So just some things to think about. And within that, you can specialize in a variety of techniques, play therapy to dialectical behavioral therapy to EMDR. So the opportunities are kind of endless. It just, again, depends on your passions. There's also individuals that are coming from psychology, human development undergrads that can go into a variety of fields. The nice thing about it is that psychology kind of allows you to take a variety of different paths, and you can go into business because you use psychology with business. You can go into education. If you like working with computers and coding and social media, stuff like that, you can do human-computer interaction, or if you really are in it for the long haul, you can do a PsyD PhD program and become a psychologist. So again, lots of opportunities. It just depends on what you want to do. So I'll talk a little bit as we work towards the end of this presentation for important steps, things you should be doing now if possible. So really, really important is starting to build your social capital and professional network. Now is the most perfect time for all of you to connect and build relationships with your instructors, with your advisors, any supervisors that you have, staff on campus. And the reason being is professional networking is so important, but also you're going to need professional references for graduate school as you enter the workforce that can speak to your career readiness, responsibility, your strengths, and your professionalism. So if you haven't started doing that, you should start doing that. One of the things that you should start doing if you don't already have it is create a LinkedIn. It's one of the biggest professional networks. I use it often. I don't post a lot on it, which I should probably post more. But I do use it to find out about workshops for continuing education. And it's just a nice place to network with other professionals that are in your area or that you need to know for specialty related purposes. You should be engaging in career discussions with your advisor. Those should be ongoing discussions, checking in, even if it's more than just once during the semester. Stay connected with your advisors. Make sure that you are looking over your credit hours. I kind of had a terrible instance with that happen during my bachelor's. That was pretty stressful towards the end, but make sure that you are having those discussions. Are you looking into grad school? What kind of career paths are you thinking of for grad school? They can also help refer you to career services office. You do not need a referral from them. You can refer yourself. But it's bolded for a reason because this is an amazing resource to all students that is available at no additional cost. These are individuals that work for the college that want to do everything they can to help you be prepared as you leave college. They can help you with career exploration, literally through taking some assessments and talking about your strengths through those assessments. They can help you with cover letter and resume assistance. So you don't want to just have a blanket cover letter or a blanket resume. You really want to customize that to whatever job listing that you're looking at or industry so that you do stand out and, recruiters pay attention to it. They can also help connect you with job and internship search process, career fair events. So I'm assuming most of those are virtual, but still a good thing to be involved in. And interview prep and practice. I cannot say enough how important it is to practice interviewing. When I was a student at Oswego, I remember towards the end, I was starting to practice, and they had kind of like a virtual interview interface where they had pre-recorded questions from interviewers, and then you would record your answer. And I couldn't believe how humiliating it was because I had never practiced interviewing before. And one of them was, tell me about some of your strengths. And I just sat there. So get connected with them. They're there to help you. They're an excellent resource. It's free to students. They want to help you be prepared. And honestly, again, I didn't use them enough when I was at Oswego. If I could go back in time, I would use them a million times more than what I did. So another thing to just think about as you work through your education and work towards whatever career path you're hoping to take is to supplement your education with experience. I know that's super hard to do right now. COVID has placed an immense amount of restrictions on typical things that college students are able to do. But if you're able to, get involved with a club on campus, even if it's virtual. If you're able to be a research assistant or a teaching assistant, there's peer advisement. The counseling services have peer-to-peer educators. There's employment if that's available on campus in some capacity. I don't know the specifics of that. And then any kind of volunteer opportunities in the community. So I know that there's a variety of agencies and places that look for volunteers. So if you're able to volunteer your time, I know some of them are even just doing phone calls to individuals that want to mentor. Those are things that you can put on your resume that are part of human services too. So and then my last point, so I just want to make sure we leave time for questions if there are any, is reframing experiences. So right now it's hard to find that silver lining. I think students are feeling really down with their educational experience, feeling like there's not a lot of positivity about what they're doing or what they're getting. But what I would challenge you to do is to reframe it and try to find, it's hard to find, but try to find the silver lining. So although your education is totally different, although your experiences are being limited right now, unfortunately, you're still going to enter the workforce at some point and have to somehow pull a positive out of this. So think about it as reframing it into how coronavirus has helped you become more flexible. So if you're a rigid, structured person like me, I haven't really liked coronavirus, but it has helped individuals become more flexible. It helps you adapt to agency and workflow needs. For counseling, we have never done telemental health before in any of the settings that I've worked in. And if we didn't do telemental health, we wouldn't be able to provide services to students free of cost. And like I said earlier, not all students can be referred off campus. So we have become very flexible and adaptive to that. It's definitely been a learning experience. It's not something that we learned in graduate school. We had to do some continuing education to learn telemental health and best practices and whatnot. But again, you're able to respond and overcome challenges and be adaptive to what the work or agency needs. If you have, these are just some examples, but like sales experience, it seems silly. Like, what does sales have to do with applying to a graduate program? Well, you can talk about organizational skills. You can talk about collaboration with other team members, ability to take direction and constructive feedback from your supervisors and your managers. If you are a waitress, I used to waitress. You have to have excellent communication skills. You have to be able to have a positive attitude and memorize specials, promote daily specials to all of your customers, and ensure that they have a positive dining experience. That's what they're paying for, right? Know your strengths. If I could give any student any piece of advice, and this is something that we work on in counseling, we work on it in our exploratory sessions with students, is knowing what your strengths are. It's really easy for us all to identify what we don't like about ourselves, because society does a really great job of highlighting that. But when people ask us, tell me some of your strengths, tell me what do you bring to the table that's different? When I do that in counseling with students, they stare at me with a blank stare and kind of like a sense of embarrassment as well. And it's because we don't talk about our strengths as often as we should. But those are such important points to bring to an interview, to bring to your job with you someday. They are going to ask you what your strengths are. They're also going to ask you what your weaknesses are. So you need to be able to know how to answer those questions, and you need to be able to answer them in a way that makes you an applicant that they want to hire. So you can talk about your ability to focus and how your focusing ability has helped you meet deadlines over and over and completion of tasks that were assigned to you, and working together with other team members, being dependable, your leadership skills, communication skills, etc. So I know I have taken up pretty much the entire hour talking. These are just some helpful resources that I have listed for you. So again, if you're interested in the mental health counseling program, please refer to Graduate Studies for more information. They can provide you all that you need to know to make a decision on if you want to apply to that program. Career Services, I can't push that enough. Take advantage of any and everything being offered during this amazing workshop series. Any volunteer opportunities that you can take advantage of those while it's, you're going to need that when you go to interviews. That's what separates you from the person in the room that has the same degree as you. So you do need to have real hands-on experience.
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was amazing. We do have a few questions from the chat, and I see there's one in the Q&A box, so I'm going to go to that one first, and then I'll go to the chat. This first one says, I understand that New York State may require specific exams to be taken for certification and to get your license. Are other states similar or different?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So licensure portability has been a tabled concern for some time. And what I mean by that is that the New York State licensing exam is not always the same as every other state. So if you were to get your license in New York and then, I don't know, life happens and you need to move to, I don't know, South Carolina or something like that, they may not have the same licensing exam. So you may have to resubmit to their state everything, essentially, all of your graduate school information, your licensing information, syllabi. And then in addition to that, and I only know this because I've also kind of researched, if I were to move, what would I need to do? Sometimes there are courses that are not included in New York State coursework that you have to take in another state. So Florida has some ones that we don't have in New York State. So it does depend, and there's different titles based on what state you're going to transfer your license to. So oftentimes what you'll hear is LPC, which is Licensed Professional Counselor. LMHC is a little bit more common down south, I would say. But yeah, it really depends on where you're going to go. So you would have to go on to that state's licensing board website and research what their requirements are and what you need to do to transfer your license.
Nice. The next question here says, would It would seem that this field may be very easy to bring your work home with you. Do you have any tips for how you keep work and life balance in this specific field?
Yes, it can be very stressful. That is actually a huge part of the program at SUNY Oswego is there's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of focus on creating a self-care plan. I think in my first job that I explained first with the agency perspective, I did not have a good self-care plan and I brought home work a lot. I had email on my phone. I just never disconnected and I was always very stressed. It impacted my social relationships, my familial relationships. So with any kind of setting with mental health, you really need to have a good self-care plan, and that's going to vary from person to person. I'm an exercise person. I go 3 times a week, but I also like to read. I like to spend time with my dog. She's part of my self-care plan. And yeah, you do have to, it's kind of like another full-time job is to kind of make sure you're focusing on taking care of yourself because you can't really help somebody if you're expended and you haven't refilled your cup. So
I would definitely say that dogs are definitely very helpful. So I agree with that.
yeah.
What made you realize you wanted to go into counseling?
That's a great question. Actually, if I'm being completely honest, during my bachelor's, in my senior semester, still had no idea what I wanted to do with psychology. I actually ended up applying to a variety of programs. I never went to career services as an undergraduate and met with somebody, and I wish I had because it probably would have been extremely helpful to have somebody guide me. But ultimately, if I'm being honest, my family pushed me into counseling because they felt like they were sick of me trying to counsel them at home. But I do have a passion for it. I do enjoy very much what I do. It doesn't feel like a job. And yeah, that's my honest answer. Some people know right away what they want to do with human services and psychology. I was not one of those people. I was still very undecided towards the end, but I'm really happy with the decision I made to attend Oswego's program. And I really feel like it's the best program. I know I'm biased, but I feel like it's honestly one of the best programs you can go to.
That's awesome that like you knew what you wanted to and everything. So next question says, I know your profession was probably one that was super helpful for people during the pandemic. What were some trends or things you saw with your profession during this pandemic?
So I will speak just from my collegiate setting that I'm in right now. But the biggest concern that we saw for counseling were that students had a really difficult time adjusting to the format of delivery of their classes. So students that most students do prefer face-to-face instruction. They learn better from face-to-face instruction. There's also like a routine component with that. Some of them really struggled with the quick adjustment to online learning. Some of them had never taken an online class before. Just the interface in itself was really confusing. There were students with internet related issues, or they didn't have a laptop. They were doing like all of their work on their phone. So that created an immense amount of stress. It most certainly perpetuated their underlying anxiety, but new anxiety with academic stress. There were students that felt really lonely and depressed due to all the restrictions on campus with our residence halls. And just not being able to even have a roommate, or we didn't have a lot of events on campus. So, they felt really disconnected from their peers, from the campus community. I saw a slight rise in eating related disorders. And unfortunately, where I work in my area, we really don't have a place that specializes it or providers that specialize in it. So like the nearest to us is Syracuse. And oftentimes that's really hard for students to get there for a variety of challenges as well. So that was a trend that I saw in the fall. I'm trying to think. Those were the main primary concerns. And then obviously with COVID, grief and loss has been really hard for some students that have unfortunately lost family members due to COVID, or have been in quarantine, or have had loved ones in quarantine and haven't been able to connect with them or see them, and that just like really spikes their anxiety, and there's just a lot of fear with that, a lot of unknowns. So I would say those are the main concerns that we've seen over the past few months.
Wow, that's incredible. Like, just, it's changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
How did you like doing group therapy?
So group therapy is not my favorite. And I don't feel I have a lot of experience with group therapy. I really have only done it in my first work setting, and it wasn't like a typical group. So for the kids that I worked with, they always had staff with them. And behaviors kind of impacted group process. So it was more of like a psychoeducational group than anything else. It wasn't like a traditional therapy group where you would interact and have a lot of discussion and feedback. You know, if we got through a group without paint being thrown on another child, that was a successful group. So groups are not my favorite. I know professionals that love running groups. So I think it just depends on what population you're working with and what setting you're working in. When I worked in the alternative education setting and I did groups for kids that had IEPs, so social groups, even some anger management I did there, and social skills, those were much more enjoyable. The kids were obviously older. The behaviors did not impact the group process as much. Like they might swear at each other and need like a redirection, or very rarely would they walk out. Typically groups were not intense like that. They were like 2 to 3 kids at a time. But I felt like we were able to focus more versus the first setting where there was just a lot of chaos all the time, and it was just very unpredictable. So the process itself was always intercepted by something.
Then our last question is, do you have any tips for students or recent grads when it comes to getting hired in the mental health field, and how they might be able to stand out to employers?
Yeah, so for any mental health professionals on this call, I strongly encourage you to supplement your education with experience. Again, I know that's really hard because COVID has made a lot of things very difficult, opportunities difficult for students. But even if you could do a phone mentorship, or there's a lot of, I don't know as much about Oswego community, but there's a lot of agencies that are looking for volunteers, people that can help. If you feel safe enough to do so, those are things that you can bring with you to interviews, because they're going to ask you about experiences, and they don't ask you very much about your education during your first interview, or any following interview, really. That's a very short part of your interview. The remainder of your interview is spent on, you know, the experiences that you bring to the table, your strengths, what are some of your weaknesses, which everyone hopefully knows you're going to reframe into a strength, and what are some goals that the company has, and how can you help support those goals. So I strongly encourage any kind of experience that you can do. If you can do a variety of experiences during your education now, any kind of clubs or honor societies that you can be a part of. Even just virtual events, if the college is doing any kind of like virtual event and you can help in any way, that shows that you're willing to work and help support. And obviously you'll have human interaction that you can speak to. So just get involved. It might also help fill your cup if you're one of those students that's kind of struggling right now, and this is just like not the college experience that you wanted. It might help you feel connected to other students and might help you feel like there's something positive that you can pull from this.
Well, that's actually all that we have for today. Those are all the questions. So thank you all so much for your participation. It was great. And to Jordan for inspiring us for today. We hope to see you all tonight at the Imagine 2021 day session with Barbara Cicerone at 7 p.m. And you can see the link in the chat as well. And have a great evening, everyone. And thank you all for coming.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.